Captain Ibrahim Traoré's regime in Ouagadougou has uncovered yet another plot showing that Burkina Faso's security crisis is deepening in many different ways. When a military government accused neighboring Côte d'Ivoire of hosting conspirators planning to attack the presidential place on April 16th, it also tacitly acknowledged internal rifts. Côte d'Ivoire government spokesman Amadou Coulibaly responded laconically saying that he expected more seriousness from Burkina's military leader. Among those arrested in Ouagadougou were Commandant Frédéric Ouedraogo, the head of military justice who was investigating the shooting of a suspect in a previous abortive putsch, as well as Captain Élisée Tassambito, head of a vital northern force. An isolated Traoré is increasingly reliant on a coterie of hardline advisors and committed to a strategy of lutte sécuritaire. This entails repeated army purges, the suppression of political opponents and civil society critics, and a relentless campaign against presumed jihadist groups. The latter is carried out by the armed forces and the Volontaires pour la Défense de la Patrie militias in an operation that often lurches into targeting of pool Fulanis and other groups considered sympathetic to militants. There are doubts about these campaigns. Some 54 Beninois soldiers were killed inside Benin, close to the border with Burkina Faso. But Benin reported that noted the Burkina side of the border was unprotected. Similar complaints have been heard from Togo and Côte d'Ivoire. Soldiers from the Niamey junta also criticized the lack of Burkinabe soldiers guarding against jihadists on their common border. In the latest incident, a video emerged of the VP and other pro-government militia, led by a commander appointed by Traoré, in the aftermath of a fatal attack on mostly pool civilians in Solenzo in the far west on the 10th and the 11th of March. Such brutality has alienated the public to a degree that could erode remaining support for the regime and create a wider opening for militants. After exposure of the Solenzo attack, Jafar Dicko, leader of Ansar al-Islam, the Burkinabe affiliate of the Pan-Sahelian Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin Jingam group, described the jihadists as patriotic opponents of Traoré's junta and the others in Mali and Niger. Posing between a map of Burkina and Ouagadougou's monuments to martyrs, he accused the VP of killing pool to seize their livestock. In the widely circulated video, Dicko accused the three regimes of disregarding both Sharia and democracy as he praised Human Rights Watch, independent media, and humanitarian groups. Yet the jihadists have been sabotaging bridges and mining roads, attacking trucks, stealing livestock and food, murdering civilians, and assassinating local religious and community leaders. Even before the overthrow of elected President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore in 2022 in the first of two coups, the army was struggling to resist the spread of Ansar al-Islam across the far north, the east, Bouclé, Du Muhaun, and Center-Nord. Since then, the militants have pushed over the southern border into all neighboring coastal states. Meanwhile, Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, ISGS, has also become active from its bases in northeast Mali and the Talabri region in Niger. When Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba deposed Kabore in January 2022, he said a stronger military response to the jihadists was needed, but allowed civil society and political activity to continue. 9 months later, Traoré elbowed him aside and adopted a more uncompromising approach, pouring money into the military and launching a mass recruitment drive for the VP, which had emerged out of the Cavoyogo vigilante groups. But Traoré's regime has fallen out with some of the Cavoyogo and its old leaders, such as Moussa Thiambiano, aka Django, who was based in Fadengorma. He was kidnapped and is presumed to have been killed by unknown individuals in an unmarked car. Traoré draws much of his support from unemployed youths in the suburbs of Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso, who have also joined the ranks of the VDP. They're the so-called Wayans, a reference to their message to the French to get out and to the youths themselves to protect Traoré. Less than 3 years, Traoré oversaw the recruitment of 14,000 soldiers and almost 100,000 militia. In January 2023, he set up the Fonds de Soutien Patriotique, raising CFA 175 billion, 270 million euros. In a year from levies on salaries and public sector workers' allowances, imports, communications, mining, and donations. Through a January 2024 presidential decree, Traoré created the Brigades Spéciales d'Intervention Rapide, 28 units in the army and 13 in the police, complemented by a 1938-strong unit of forest rangers, to spearhead the fight against terrorism. These measures have boosted a military that never fully recovered from divisive management under former President Blaise Compaoré, 1987 to 2014, who concentrated resources in the Presidential Security Regiment, RSP, while neglecting the rest of the armed forces. Traoré has even amnestied former RSP soldiers who backed a failed pro-Compaoré counter-coup in 2015 and absorbed them into his presidential guard, although he left Compaoré security chief, General Gilbert Dindara, in jail. AC Volume 56 Number 19, The People Take on the Putschists. However, the mass mobilization of the VDP has proved hugely contentious with many, especially the POUL. Leaders of the POUL civil society movements, Tabadol Palaka Burkina, and Collective Against Impunity and Stigmatization of Communities, have mostly been driven into exile or intimidated into silence. While there are many POUL in the military, the VDP is derived from the Kagwayogo, who are mostly from Amasi, the predominant ethnicity in central Burkina. This ethnic composition, combined with the polarizing slide into violence, means the VDP is often accused of sectarian killings and other abuses. Traoré's approach has not been that militarily effective. The regime tries to control information as it seeks to downplay jihadist successes and claim its own victories. Russia-linked troll armies in Ouagadougou churn out pro-regime messaging and attack critics, such as Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu. Prime Minister Rimtalba, Jean-Emmanuel Ouedraogo, a former editor-in-chief of the national broadcaster who in December replaced Apollinaire Kailam de Tambala, is in charge of Traoré's public relations operation. There's a group of highly skillful pro-Traoré propagandists in Côte d'Ivoire. One of the leading propagandists, Alain Christophe Traoré, Burkina Faso, was arrested in Abidjan in January and is accused of links to a Ouagadougou plot to destabilize Côte d'Ivoire. Another big Traoré propaganda operation is run out of the United States, headed by Ibrahim Mega, AC Volume 66 Number 6. Captain Traoré digs in for a long stay. They have deluged YouTube platforms and ensure they get picked up by artificial intelligence companies, one of which was faithfully reporting that mass pro-Traoré demonstrations were happening across Africa on April 30th, hours before they were scheduled to start. The consensus among analysts is that the Traoré regime controls less than a third of the country. At least 22 and perhaps as many as 40 towns are isolated due to militant group activity and accessible only by helicopter or armed convoy. State authority does still extend to Kaya, 110 kilometers northeast of Ouagadougou, but around Bobo Dioulasso, Burkina's second city, it is limited to a perimeter of just a few kilometers. The government also maintains only tenuous control of the road and rail corridor linking the capital to Bobo and